No basketball tonight, right? But still, pretty good pace. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate everyone attending this evening. We have a total of 7 items on the agenda. All but 2 of those we'll have a public hearing for. And without further ado, we'll have Commissioners Howard and Knudsen pray for us and lead us in the pledge. Maybe not in that order.
Prayer first.
Prayer, please.
Our Heavenly Father, we're thankful for the opportunity which we have to gather this evening. We're thankful for this area and this city in which we live. Thankful for the freedoms we enjoy and for this country. We're thankful for the opportunity to gather to discuss and make decisions concerning the city and its development. We're thankful for all those who have come this evening to express their feelings, and we ask for thy Spirit to be with us, that we will be able to speak clearly and kindly and be able to feel of thy Spirit. We're thankful for all the blessings which we receive at thy hand. We ask these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Please arise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, roll call. Let's start on our left with Shannon.
Shannon Ellsworth, no conflicts.
Andrew Howard, no conflicts.
Dave Anderson, no conflicts.
Russell Phillips, I'm a member of the neighborhood of item number 2, but I have no conflicts.
I'm Robert Knudsen, and the same as Mr. Phillips.
Once again, thank you. Item number 1, this is a proposed ordinance text amendment associated with accessory apartment overlay zones. We will open the public hearing tonight after staff gives us a brief description of the item, and we do anticipate continuing this item to the Planning Commission's next meeting. I believe that would be the first commission meeting in June.
I guess we don't necessarily have anything further to present unless you have questions or comments that you want to make from the study session.
Thank you, Mr. Maxfield. Do we have any questions of staff? Anything to add maybe to what we talked about earlier tonight?
I think here probably.
Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and open up the public hearing then. Anybody here that would like to speak to item number 1, please come forward.
Maybe just do a summary that it's about the SNA overlay for the public.
Yeah. Text changes to different things relative to how the city would implement and regulate accessory apartments in the 2.
Yeah, we've got the handout we can give to them and show what the differences are. Basically, to summarize that, rental dwelling license would be required in the A and the S overlays. Inspection would be required every 3 years. Principal unit occupancy by the owner, and that's a principal unit. There'd still be required occupancy of a unit in the building, but the principal one wouldn't have to be occupied by the owner. Location with the home, the change was in the S overlay, where now it has to be either below or above. It could be anywhere in the home. And then the detached dwelling is the additional allowance. It would be in both the A and S overlays. And also emphasize that the RC is de facto has an A overlay over it. So it would obviously apply there. And those were the changes. On the sheet, we gave a comparison with the elderly allowance to show what's allowed in that zone, just to show you're aware of what the comparison is. But an elderly, you cannot build a new unit. It has to be within an existing structure. You have to be 65 years and older and live in the dwelling, except for certain exceptions, which are listed, which are usually away from the area for a little bit of time until you return.
Okay, once again, thank you. In light of that, any additional discussion before we open things up to the public?
The objective is just to clarify and bring them into alignment with each other.
Correct. Now, the biggest things that people have pointed out, it does require the dwelling license for all units and the 3 years of inspection, rather than originally inspection was done at the initial, licensing of an accessory unit now would be required to be renewed every 3 years.
This clarifies it makes it more clear and easier to enforce and simplify.
More consistent, very much more. I did skip over one, I apologize for that, it's smaller there, but the occupancy in the S overlay also changed to 2 singles rather than 4. You still could get 4 with a conditional use permit, but it dropped the by right number down to 2 rather than 4. Sorry, apologize for that.
The opportunity to have an accessory dwelling unit in a detached structure of some type, that's new as well, right? Or-
That's new, right? And we clarified that at the study session, is if you have a dwelling unit in an accessory structure, that structure would have to be 10 feet off the property line, at least the portion that somebody lives in. That way, we'll make sure that's clear.
Some other architectural
Yeah.
types of provisions as well. Okay, last call. Is anybody here tonight that would like to speak to this? Okay, great. Public hearing's open and closed. Let's leave the public hearing open. And if there's any further discussion, let's chat about it, but then we'll have to have a motion to continue the public hearing to the June 12th meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue the public hearing till June 12th.
We have a motion.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, wonderful. That was unanimous. Item number 2. This is a proposal for project plan approval for a restaurant located on West Center Street in the general commercial zone. No public hearing with project plan approval request, right?
Public hearing.
No public hearing?
Yes.
There is a public hearing. Okay. Got it. We'll turn things over to staff.
Thank you. So this item is located on West Center Street, around 2100 West here on Center Street. It's next to the Family Dollar store there, just to the west of that. And the applicant is proposing to construct a new restaurant on this vacant site here. The development would be proposed for a 1-story restaurant with 13 parking spaces, which would allow for 52 seats within the restaurant. Staff has reviewed the proposed plan and would recommend approval on it. And along with this, the design corridor on West Center Street was reviewed, and this project would conform with that. There's buffering requirements along Center Street that would add a berm and some additional landscaping that we wouldn't typically see on other developments, but for the design corridor, it's designed to help enhance that corridor and buffer the development. And so it would meet those requirements as well. And if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to go over those.
Have any questions of staff?
Is there any design requirement for putting parking in the front or back or side? I know it's a narrow lot, I just wondered.
Yeah, so the design corridor does have some setback requirements. They want to push the building back a minimum of 20 feet On this site, being as narrow as it is, getting the parking around to the back wasn't really a feasible option, given the dimensions of how narrow and everything this lot is. So it does conform to the design corridor standards of being at least 20 feet back. It's obviously much more than that, but as far as a requirement to have the parking in the back, that's not part of the design corridor. If that's kind of what your question is.
Yeah, what does the future land use map say for the west side of Center Street? What do we want it to look like in 20 or 30 years?
For the west, like west of
The freeway?
freeway.
Yeah.
So the portion south of Center Street's going through a plan right now. This is on the east side, and so there hasn't been as in-depth of a process there, from what I understand. But along the corridor, having these commercial uses is part of that. How the rest of that plays out, I think, is based on what the current zoning is or what some future changes might be, but I guess I don't have an exact answer for you for that.
Okay, thanks.
Access management. There's the Dollar Store. Just Dollar
Family
General.
Dollar.
Thank you, Family Dollar. Hey, say enough things, we'll get it right. As things build out, is there a way that we could work to consolidate some of the access points? Maybe work with engineering or that type of a thing? Working with applicants at this stage to get them maybe to put their points of access on property lines or those types of things. The Starbucks plan that we looked at in the last meeting or the meeting before that one kind of just made me think about the impact of having individual properties each have their own point of access versus trying to limit that number. And maybe it's a question of just how does Provo approach that now? Do we have any provisions that would require a certain separation between driveways or different things that would work to compel an applicant to try to work with neighbors and to get cross access and cross parking agreements in place and all those types of things to make it work?
David with Public Works. We don't really have anything in place to force that to happen. I think that would have to be probably a private agreement between maybe the Family Dollar and the applicant, but we've looked at this and we're comfortable with it, but I know what you're saying. It would be nice to master plan out the corridor and say, here's the access, everybody share it.
Yeah, particularly where Family Dollars access is right on their west property line.
Yeah.
It just seems like an ideal situation where maybe those could have been combined. And I don't know necessarily what the plan is for additional non-residential development, maybe further down the road to the west. If it makes any sense to try to look at that. This site's narrow enough that I think it's probably really hard to lay it out any other way. Definitely wouldn't be as efficient as what they have here, but
I think that commercial zone ends at the edge of right here, I think that's commercial.
No, it is.
That's it.
maybe just a general thing. Actually, I'd love to chat about it.
Really don't know how to, I wasn't on, sorry. Hope you could hear me.
I could hear you. I appreciate that. And
Yeah, I don't-
you don't have to labor it, but
Because ultimately on collectors, arterials, we say access is limited to city streets. And that's kind of the standard, but we haven't ever really said, hey, property owner, you can't have access.
Where you have frontage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
this, once you hit Geneva Road, this does drop off in volume quite a bit. So it's not as busy as the north or the eastern end.
Just have really big plans for the airport though, right? And
Yeah, we're hoping the higher volumes will use the connector road. So, and then we'll have the other road going north into Orem. So hopefully when all that gets connected, we'll have less traffic going to the airport down Center Street.
I appreciate that. Thanks. This is a public hearing? Okay. Would anybody, actually, before we go there, yeah, applicant, anything to add? Anything you'd like to present?
My name's Randy Hinckley. I'm the one trying to build this restaurant. Just a little bit about we've been a year and 5 months trying to get this building permit. And it's been quite the process. The city had us approach Family Dollar about combining the access there, and Family Dollar didn't want anything to do with it. They wouldn't allow us to have an access into there and didn't want to disturb the property line, so that got railroaded out. We got another right there. There's a gentleman building a Mexican restaurant there that has, only 4 parking stalls right there in the rear. And then over here on the corner, in the last 2 years, there's been a permanent food trailer with what's put up a tough shed and another shed to eat in and a portable porta potty. We've invested a lot of time and money in this, and it's our desire to build something that the locals can be proud of. I live right here across the street at this property right here. Grew up down here on the west side. The restaurant will be called Branded Local. We'll be serving great hamburgers, smothered hot dogs and french fries, soft ice cream. We put a lot of time and effort in it. We're going to be supporting the local growers and producers of Provo and Utah County as much as we can. We're going to take great pride in it, the decor of it, the building of it. If you look at some of the materials and things we're using on the front of it, stone, stuff like that, there's a lot of other ways we could have gone cheap, but we're not. We want something that Provo can be proud of in 20 years, 30 years. My kids can be running when I'm long and dead. I've had a lot of people say, well, you can get away doing this a lot cheaper if you go this way or this way. But it's not simply about that. We want something that the local community, people that know us, can come and eat at and know that it's clean, healthy, and done right. We'll be buying beef from the Hallidays, the Hinkleys, all sorts of vegetables from Stubbs and different producers around the valley. This is what the community needs and wants, especially the west side is lacking in eateries, restaurants in general, and especially something of this caliber. So I would hope that you'll look at it and know with what's available down there to work with. It's a great thing. It's going to be a thing that people can walk over from Fort Utah during baseball games. We get a lot of foot traffic up and down there. It's not all about just coming and parking. It's going to be a place that works. For years we put up with a snowy shack on the corner that we still got boulders and sandboxes and weeds left over from that after about 5-6 years of that. I don't know how long the taco stand's going to be on the corner, but I look out my kitchen window every day, and as we've been fighting this process for a year and 5 months, I'm like, well, am I going to get to build the building we want, or do we just go get a food trailer and park on there? And I don't think that's the way anybody wants. So I hope we can work through this. A lot of things we've already dug up. My wife's a photographer and gone to great lengths to make this something that people, as he's moving forward, I'm just surprised that he's as far along as he is with as little as he's done compared to the amount of work we've put into our design. I don't care that he's opening up. It's not my business, and more power to him. But what we have proposed and what he's got going and that surrounding areas, our building's gonna line up with Family Dollar. It's gonna look the part. It'll look like it's supposed to be there, so.
Okay.
The restaurant, the Mexican restaurant to the west is just a home that's been renovated, pretty tight, so,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is anybody here from the public that would like to speak to this item? Come forward.
I'm Dan Williams. I own the Family Dollar, excuse me, next door. The east access is a proposed shared access when the corner's developed, this corner here. So it's, that would be a shared access. Family Dollar has, this is a design build for Family Dollar. So after we got site plan approval, then Family Dollar gave us a 10-year lease on the property, and we can't remove even a tree or a plant. It's all in the contract that it has to stay the way it is. So we're not able to share any other access or do anything on the west side. But the east side will be eventually a shared access. My concerns are, I guess, on the east side of the property, our west side, there's an existing fence, masonry fence. With the proposal, it looks like there's only a 2-foot planting area, and by the time a car hits that curb, their front bumper's also going to be hitting the fence. So that would be a concern that I have. And then the parking on the proposed Spanish restaurant, the parking slab is about even with the top of our fence. And so I don't see any elevations, but I'm concerned that how they're going to get the elevations to drain to the sump drains or in the middle of the parking lot, and how that elevation will affect our fence. So are there elevations there for drainage or?
As far as like what the elevation of the terrain would be, or?
Well, so the fence line that we have.
So are you talking about the Mexican restaurant?
What?
Are you talking about the Mexican restaurant?
Well, yeah, so the Mexican restaurant, the parking that's existing there is even with the top of our fence.
So could you come see us in our office and we can show you what plans we've got?
Okay,
The Mexican restaurant's not subject to this meeting, and we don't have any of the details of those plans here.
Well,
But if you can come to the office, we can share those with you.
okay, I just wonder how the elevation, how they're gonna address that elevation, our elevation. They're in quite a hole where they are right now. So that's important to me.
That's a great question. We don't have any of those plans, access to those plans here in this meeting, but we've got all those in the office, and we'd be happy to go through those with you.
Okay, all right, that is one of my concerns. But right now with the site plan, I just don't see how the parking, they're going to be able to park, and unless there's bumpers or something that the cars will, and I don't know about the depth of the parking spaces, if there's room to put bumpers or if you need the full depth there. So that would be our concern. And we need to have the fence that's there existing when the project's done. So we want to be a good neighbor. I think the development in that area is a good idea, but we want to make sure that, we're not impacted as well. So,
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this item?
Let's bring Randy back up.
One more comment. I know he doesn't want anybody bump in his fence, which he's talking about, is right here. When Family Dollar was built, I don't know how it got through, but this fence right here is about 2 feet below his grade. So if you pull in Family Dollar now and you look, that top of his fence is literally only about 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet above his curb. So in construction, this fence is gonna have to be raised up. I don't know how that got passed, but it's gonna have to be brought up. Once it's brought up and our lot's brought up to the grade of Family Dollar, we're not gonna, them cars' bumpers aren't gonna hit his fence, and we're not gonna want them running into his fence. So whatever we gotta do to make sure that don't happen is fine, but he's got concerns about that fence, and I think it's because hindsight, it got set below grade years ago, and it should have been up. And once it's all done and said and improved, it'll work. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything to add to this? No, honestly, we have staff here. They can deal with all of the, whether it's a stormwater issue or anything else relative to the wall. That's what they're here for day in and day out. Honestly, we're not qualified to do anything to help you with that, but I'm very, very confident that whether it's a matter of making sure that with a 2-foot separation from the back of a curb to a wall, making sure that that's sufficient space so that somebody else's property, a neighbor, doesn't get damaged, or making sure that proper steps are taken if a neighbor's property gets impacted during construction. I have complete confidence that staff can handle that, and I think you'll get a lot farther working with them than those of us here that frankly we don't know. I appreciate you bringing the issues to everybody's attention. I think that's very helpful, but there's just not much we can do with that. Anybody else here tonight that would like to address the commission? Okay, if that's it, we'll close the public hearing. Any discussion? Item number 2?
I think it's going to be good for both their businesses. I think it's going to be a compatible thing. They don't seem to compete directly, and I think it's a good thing for the west side.
Anybody else?
No, Randy and his team will make sure that these elevations work on the east so they don't impact that fence. So
Yeah, I'd like to believe, and maybe this is naive, but I'd like to believe it's going to be an enhancement, just relative to what, and I'm not sure about what's there today. Is it just a vacant site today?
It's an empty lot.
So that certainly is the expectation that I would have. It sure seems to me like we have a lot of residents on the west side of the community that are starved for anything out there, any types of services, opportunities to patronize businesses, and I completely agree. I think anything new that gets added out there will be well patronized and appreciated by the neighborhood and the community. If we don't have anything else to discuss, entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the project plan for the restaurant located at 2122 West Center Street in the general commercial zone.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
second it.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, once again, unanimous. And genuinely, and I volunteer staff's time with a lot of confidence that they can help you out and make sure that all those issues are addressed, so. Okay, item number 3. I believe the applicant has requested that this item be continued. It's a proposed annexation, 13 or so acres, north end of the city. Staff, do you want to describe a little bit more about?
Yes, in this case, there's a development that proposed for the site. There was we weren't ready to bring that forward yet because there were some issues dealing with utilities and other things that needed to service that area. Public Works expressed their opinion they'd rather not have the city even annex that area east of where they can service the water to this point. Planning staff didn't feel that was important. We feel that'd be covered otherwise. But the applicant indicated they're working on a development or an annexation agreement to try and address some of the issues and concerns engineering have. Now, just make you aware also, there's a large area being proposed for annexation. We have not received an application yet. We've had meetings with the applicant. There's a neighborhood meeting next Thursday that's going to deal with that annexation, deal with the Craig Pay annexation, as well as a by right development that's on Kristen Murdoch's property. I'm blanking what that one's called. I think it's Reserve on Canyon Road now or something like that. And they're going to look at all those together so we can come back to you and provide everything in context rather than kind of a piecemeal fashion. And so we're glad that the applicant decided to continue this. I think it'll make it easier for everybody to see the plan for the whole area. And then it may also then enable us to come back with recommendations on the zone other than just defaulting to the RA zone, which is the lowest density residential zone we have.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff?
Yeah, just to clarify, this will be a development proposal. I mean,
There
it'll be
is-
an annexation, and then it'll be a rezone, and then a development proposal.
Yes, there's a concept plan that they've got in right now. So you'll have the concept plan your next meeting also.
So we'll be annexing a horse farm, but it won't be a horse farm soon
Correct.
thereafter. Okay.
So procedurally, they've filed the petition for annexation. They're in the protest period, or
They're beyond the initial period. They did not want to go forward because they were not getting positive recommendations at that time. We couldn't give them because of the outstanding issues. We're trying to satisfy utility needs for this whole area and look on that as a whole. To service one small piece sounds possible, but it could cause problems if we're not really thinking on a larger scale. And so we had always said, you can certainly be on any agenda you want, but right now we cannot recommend, give you a positive staff recommendation. And so even though planning staff could go forward positively at this last go-around, engineering still has its issues, and I think you got their statement on the memo. And so they are now responding to that by saying, okay, let's pull it again and see if we can't resolve some of those issues in time for the next meeting. Principally, it's water service. The city cannot, has enough pressure to extend water beyond a certain elevation, which is about halfway through this property. And this other annexation deals with the bench area and is deals with proposals to build the water service through that area. Sewer and other things can with extensive work. There are breaks in this area. Some goes north, some goes south. And they're just trying to work that out. For the concept plan, it's looking for a kind of an access spine running north-south through the middle of the projects, of this project and other possible future projects, so that there's better access rather than just Canyon Road or going up the hill. There's a connecting access. And so those are just some of the things we've been trying to work out.
okay, appreciate that.
What's the potential acreage that could come into the
Of the whole
annexed?
area, I apologize, I know we've got that. It's everything there you see that's not colored, except for some that are opting out. You've
All
got
of this area.
Yeah, the one.
All of the white area.
Yeah, you have the Gillespie properties directly on the east of Craig Pays and the south of Craig Pays that are wanting to stay in an ag protection area. I think we mentioned that in staff report. But a lot of the remaining area is looking to come in.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody representing the applicant here tonight? Okay. Anyone from the public that would like to speak to this tonight? Okay, great. With that, anything for us to talk about, commissioners? We'll get another chance. So,
I'd like to move that we continue this item to, is it June 12th? To June 12th.
we have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. Item number 4, another text amendment. And I'm just going to let staff go ahead and describe that.
Okay, so this one's pretty simple. It's just amending this section 1438.085 subsection 7 to clarify what signs are not permitted in the North River Bottoms Design Corridor. North University Avenue Corridor, Design Corridor. North University River Bottoms Design Corridor. Okay. We've got it now. So in the past, the language has been a bit ambiguous about what is and isn't allowed. This is simply taking that out and clarifying anything that isn't in the above section is not permitted.
I agree. That's pretty straightforward. Any questions for staff?
What about businesses that have special occasions like open house or what kind of complaints have we gotten on those kind of things, like promotional things?
Sure. In Title 1438, there are exceptions for sale, open house, those kinds of things, but those are already defined.
They're already in there. Okay, so this is just to clarify the issue. I've always found it interesting. We can't have a uniform code throughout the city, but maybe I don't understand that. I'm sure I don't.
That would be too simple.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff? Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak to item number 4? No.
Hello, I'm Dave Rosen. I'm the River Bottoms Neighborhood Chair, and I'm here to speak in favor of this proposed amendment. If we'd had it in place before, we would not end up with the eyesore that we have out there right now that has caused this amendment. So we're definitely in favor of anything that will plug the holes and keep our city beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any discussion? Item number 4? If not, somebody wants to make a motion.
Mr. Chair, I recommend that we recommend to the council that that we amend section 14.38.085 paren 7 to clarify the limitations on signage within the North University River Bottoms Design Corridor as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're batting 1,000, unanimous again. Okay, items 5, 6, and 7 are all related. We have a proposed zone change from R110 to medium-density residential, along with project plan approval for a 64-unit condominium development, and a proposed text amendment, all related to a site located at 1320 South State Street. And we'll turn things over to staff.
Mr. Chairman, although 5, 6, and 7 are all related, it's common for the Planning Commission to hear a zone change and a project plan or concept plan together. I think that would make sense. But item 7, although it's related, item 7 is different enough, it's distinct enough, and I think it has its own, there are some concerns related specifically to that I would suggest not clumping them all together and discussing them all at once. Let's discuss 5 and 6 together, get motions on those if you feel like motions are appropriate or at what point you feel like they are. And then let's do 7 separately, if that's all right.
That's
Sounds
actually
great.
how I set up my slides, so that's perfect.
Thank you.
So I'm thrilled to be up here this early. Good job, guys. So this is these are item 6 and 7. Item 5 and item 6. Item 5 is a legislative action item, so that's the proposed zone change request, and the applicant is proposing to amend the ordinance to have the site be in the MDR zone. It's currently in the R110 zone. The current general plan designation for this area is mixed use, and the future land use map for the southeast Provo neighborhood land use map indicates that this area is supposed to be MDR, so that's consistent with their request. This slide shows what the existing zoning is and what the proposed zoning is. This is a superimposed picture of why the applicant is requesting this zone change. They're proposing to construct 16-plex buildings on the site in a manner similar to what's shown up here for a total of 64 units on the site. Let's see, this is a bit better site plan, and then on the right side I've called out some specifics. So you have 4 buildings, 4 units per floor for a total of 64 units. They are proposing 2-bedroom, 1-bath units, and they are proposing 130 parking stalls on the site. And then in addition to the proposal, the applicant is also proffering a development agreement that requires 60% of the project to be owner-occupied. The applicant, I'm sure, will go into this in much greater detail than I have, but they have had the opportunity to construct this same project type in Orem in 2 different locations, and have had some great success with that, specifically because the way that the ownership criteria is set up and the way that they're pricing these units, they qualify for FHA-backed mortgages, and that is a really strong selling point and for their potential buyers. These are the proposed floor plans, basically replicated floor plan on each level, 4 units, exterior loaded. And then elevations, if you drive by, I'm sorry I don't have any pictures, but on Sand Hill Road on the way to Orem, they have just completed one of their second projects there. Mr. Pepperoni and I were able to visit their site and thought it would meet a need that we have here in Provo for this type of housing. They have, like I said, proffered a proposed development agreement, highlights which include 60% of the units to be owner-occupied. They've verbally committed to only allowing 2 adults per unit, and then they've also, in their agreement, said that they would like to have the neighborhood chair sit on their HOA committee, and then the applicant, as part of their project plan, will propose ample bicycle parking and 133 parking stalls. I'll have the applicant correct that if that's incorrect. Essentially, the applicant is asking for a reduction in parking, which Mr. Pepperoni said that we'll cover in the next section. And if you have any questions on this, I can answer those now, or I can propose, go through the amendment as well, and if you'd like me to do that.
I'd say let's go through, you talk about the text amendment?
Yeah.
It seems like it's connected.
Okay.
The
Okay. So as part of the applicant's application, because the standard parking requirement for a development like this is 2.25 stalls per unit. So for the 64 units, the applicant would be required to provide 144 parking stalls. The applicant has mentioned to us, and also in the neighborhood meeting, that in their other projects, that parking requirement has been excessive, and that then in their experience, 2 parking stalls per unit has been more than sufficient to accommodate the different parking requirements that they have. So they have submitted an application to reduce the parking standards. Currently, we do not have a mechanism in our code to allow a parking reduction for a residential project that is not in the downtown area. And so initially the applicant and I chatted just briefly to kind of introduce some legislation and make the city council aware of this concern that the applicant has. And so the initial language that the applicant used was just to, in section 1437.050, the code allows for a parking reduction based on a parking justification study for uses that are commercial, industrial, or public facilities based on those standards. Initially, the applicant proposed this language that just eliminated the reference to those specific uses. And so essentially it would open that opportunity up for any type of project to ask for a reduction in parking. Staff had concerns with that. We felt that there should probably be some additional requirements. And so our first initial take was to create some language that specifically defined affordable housing, because we felt that that would be a justifiable cause for reducing parking and to keep it affordable. The development of those extra parking stalls does add extra expense and things like that. So this is the language that we initially came up with, specifically adding a definition of affordable housing, and that constitutes being designated as affordable shall not exceed 30% of the gross monthly income of households earning 100% of the median household income for the Provo City as calculated by the U.S. Census Bureau.
Was that language adopted from a standard, a known standard, or is that just a city determination?
That was a city determination. That was our best effort.
But that coincides with some.
It does coincide, yeah. So that was based on the research that staff was able to do as far as what is affordable, what the Housing and Urban Development Department defines as affordable, and so kind of incorporating that into.
I think that's a good idea. You don't want them to be misaligned.
So yeah,
Unforeseen consequences if they are.
Lots of unforeseen consequences there.
Thank you.
So this was the language that we initially came up with as what we would support. I would also, at this point though, just put in the caveat that this probably merits additional research. This probably merits additional criteria that might be developed for a reduction in parking standards that we have not had a chance to do yet. And so our recommendation is in the staff report, move this on. We would not be offended in any way to have this item continued, so we could further develop that criteria of what exactly would a parking reduction mean. Additionally, one concern that we've identified is that this is the way a parking reduction happens is through a conditional use permit. That might not be the best vehicle per se to, pun intended, to allow for a parking reduction because of there's an implied idea that a conditional use permit is a permitted use. You should be able to obtain that unless there are specific circumstances that would merit some sort of condition. So maybe there's a better way that we could provide that. So that's kind of the situation that we're at. So if you have further questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
I have a question. Are we calling it affordable housing or moderate income housing designation? affordable housing, are we looking at 30% of this, like, average city income, or the area median average, which would, like, incorporate the county?
That's a really good question, and I put in the language Provo City. Whether that should be amended to area median income, I don't know, but for this purpose, because this is Provo City Code, I put in Provo City.
Because my guess is that Provo City has a lower average or median income than the county by far because of our beautiful university and the student population there, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, do you have any idea what the difference in those numbers are?
When I looked, I think area median income was in the $60,000 to $70,000 range. Provo City was in the 45.
That's a big.
So there's a significant difference there,
gap.
which is why I chose Provo City in the first place.
Huh. Okay. That's helpful. Oh, another question I have. Have we ever put, or has there ever been a stipulation where the neighborhood chair is on the HOA?
Not to my knowledge.
That's unprecedented. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Anything else for staff? If not, I've got a few. I'm going to kind of put staff on the spot here.
I'm ready.
Provo, 25% of Provo residents live below the poverty rate. Utah County is about 10%. Orem's about 15. It used to be that Provo, a lot of students in the valley, and that was, I think, kind of the justification for, that, or the explanation behind Provo having such a big difference relative to folks that live below the poverty level compared with other communities in the valley. Orem's changed a lot in recent years still, and there's a big difference between Provo and Orem in that respect. Like you said, our median household income in Provo, it's below $45,000. County average is $67,000. We have a lot of affordable housing in Provo today. A lot's getting built right now. A lot's been approved that would be built, I think. So just relative to this particular product meeting a need, what does staff mean by that? That there's a need for this product in Provo, which from my perspective, there's an affordable housing issue. There's a housing issue, period, right? For folks of all different demographic compositions and income groups and different things like that all along the Wasatch Front. And really I view that as a regional issue, an issue for the Wasatch Front and not Provo. Is there something unique about Provo or different that makes it such that there's a greater need for it here where we already have so much?
I personally don't know the specific need of this, but I would defer to your previous statement that housing in general is a need, and so of many different types, and this is one of those types.
I would say Provo probably does have a greater need in that this is where the governmental services are for the, especially to provide services for the demographic we're talking about. Whether or not Provo has provided enough of that already is a policy question that needs to be made, and I think the policy makers would love to have the Planning Commission's input on that.
How would we go about having a conversation about just that question, what does Provo need? And for me, it's other things like, what does Provo look like in 10 or 20 or 30 years, given the decisions that are being made today to promote low income and affordable housing? And I'd add to that, frankly, I don't think that we see the results of these decisions probably for decades, right? I mean, when the projects are new and bright and shiny, maybe a project like this that's between a state road and a railroad track near a steel fabrication plant, it operates a certain way. But I think over time, things change, and that's really when the fruits of this decision-making process become evident and really impactful. So any thoughts about how that conversation might unfold? Or
I would suggest that Planning Commission leadership contact city council leadership. Dave Harding is the current chair of the council. I know the city council has a lot of respect for planning commission decisions and opinions. I think if planning commission leadership asked to have some type of ability to meet with the council on a specific issue like that, my impression is that they would accommodate you.
I would also add to that you're kind of in the middle of, or going through the process of a general plan update, and housing is an enormous part of that general plan, and so it naturally leads to the discussion of, what really are the housing goals and the housing needs of our city, and to be able to have that frank and open discussion with the city council, I think, like Bill said, would be very welcomed.
Okay, thank you. And on the parking, I guess kind of maybe likewise, and I guess maybe it's just me having a different perspective. For me, the need for parking, that's like the need for a front door or a kitchen sink or something along those lines. And if anything, it seems to me that folks that, might, to meet the criteria that we're talking about here, particularly given where Provo's median household income is, that's we're talking about minimum wage jobs, different things like that. People that I think there's probably a greater propensity for them than the rest of us to not have 8 to 5 Monday through Friday jobs. They're coming and going at different hours just to make ends meet. Therefore, if public transit were available, it still is probably more of a stretch for them to be able to really fully utilize it than a lot of the rest of us. And location seems to be such a big deal. The site that we're talking about tonight, whether it's getting to and from a job or buying a gallon of milk or getting a kid to school or anything, it is so disconnected and seems like it's gonna be that way for a really long time. That seems to me that it's a much more relevant driving force behind what you need in terms of access to transportation and a vehicle and parking. I guess I really should maybe not a question there, but any thoughts along those lines at all?
I think that's kind of why we accommodate a larger family or a student type situation where there would be an extra need. But ultimately, that's why we felt, before we go forward with allowing a mechanism for a parking reduction, maybe we should examine exactly what the criteria that would a parking justification study would provide to us that would merit a parking reduction.
But the zoning itself is, the request for the zoning change is consistent with the previous discussions and the plans that we've had.
That's correct.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thanks. Any other discussion, any questions for staff, anything like that? Okay.
I have one question for staff. You said that they have a similar, maybe identical building in Orem, and you visited?
Yes, they have 2 projects.
And they're built?
They are built and constructed, and the applicant can tell you what the occupancy rate is, but it's very high.
Okay.
As far as being sold out.
Okay, did it seem like a quality product that would fit into Provo? Is that too?
It's a very subjective
Yeah.
question. In my opinion, yes. I think it provides housing, a 2-bedroom housing situation that a lot of families and households in Provo would probably likely fit into very well.
Okay, just when people say that they've done this in Orem, it makes me do a double take. So, thanks.
Anything else for staff? Is the applicant here tonight? Please come forward if you have anything to add or present.
Hi, my name's Brady Ducher. We appreciate being here. I think I can answer a lot of questions that were brought up. Oftentimes, we appreciate the staff and everyone being supportive of the project. We're doing a project exactly like this in Washington City, and they literally have 0 affordable housing. They adopted something last year. They don't know what's in it yet. They're being fined by the state for not having anything affordable. Their median income or their median home price is in the high 300s. And they're not aware of, they don't know what to do. And so we came to them and it blew their minds because they had no idea what as a city they could do. Provo has a little bit more, a better handle on what to do. And as we met with Dave Connect and the Affordable Housing Committee, and Provo is more aware of the need. However, what you were asking earlier, well, I'll get to it in a minute. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was working on a project up in Orem. It was a townhome project, and a large home builder came to me and wanted to buy it from me. And I was wondering, like, why do you need a little townhome project from me if, I mean, it was Edge Homes. Why, you've got all your stuff. And they said that at the time in 2012, it was 2012, 13, their townhomes were outselling their single-family homes 2 to 1. And it was because their single-family homes had edged up into the mid-3s, and so their townhomes were now the new first-time home buyer house. And their single-family homes were the ones where you sell your house and buy one of their homes now. And Edge Homes was known as the lower, they were going for the lower, they weren't up, Ivory custom homes. They were, a little bit lower. And now, that was then. Now Edge Homes, regular houses in the mid-4s, and their townhomes are in the mid-3s. So now they're basically unaffordable as well. At the same time, our group was looking at the project, and what was going on. And so we decided to build the first project up there by Winco called Villa de Este. And it was going to just be a townhome project that was be more affordable than anything out there just because it was condos. In addition to being affordable, we went over the top and went through all the horrific trouble of being FHA approved, which is a list, is a packet this big. And you take a look at it and you decide, never mind, we won't do FHA. In fact, I think we're the only project in the last, maybe there was another one, in the last 10 years that's ever been approved by the FHA for condos, just because building shut down, and then it got to be such a hassle that people just aren't doing it. And so what FHA does is the project has to meet certain guidelines for sound and safety and build and many, many other requirements. More importantly, now the buyers of our condos can qualify for lower credit standards, which many of them have because they look at your mortgage history, and if you don't have one, then you get a higher rate or you have to put more money down. FHA doesn't do that. Gifted down payment money, a parent or cosigner can sign. They qualify for many of the grants. One of them is a Provo grant. This is in the area where the Provo grant would apply. So they can come in literally with $1,000 and buy one of our units. And their mortgage payment would be, if they did that, their mortgage payment would be around $1,050. And I manage a lot of projects in Provo, and if someone had a brand new 2-bed, 1-bath house for me, I'd probably start at about $1,100. So they're paying less to buy this with $1,000 down than they would pay if they had to go rent. So as Robert was talking, it's a 64-unit project. There's bicycle parking at either end of both. We're probably going to add some motorcycle parking because what we found is many of these people have one car and a motorcycle, or just one car, or one car and a scooter. We think there's universal support for the zone change, and so it's the parking that I'll address real quickly, because as we met with the Affordable Housing Committee, with city staff, and with the work session with the city council, there are protections and things that the city should know to do if someone's coming with an affordable housing project that they might not be aware of. And so we wanted to go over what we're offering and what the city, that probably can't get involved in every part of it, but the city should be asking. First, this project also qualifies for the new that just passed House Bill 34 that says here's what cities can do for affordable housing. And Provo's probably already doing many of them, but this qualifies for House Bill 34. When we first went to Orem said they had the similar thing up there, a PD, which is similar to what Provo calls a PUD, which you don't even do anymore, right? And
I think you've got it backwards, but anyway, they know what a PUD is, so go ahead.
Okay. Or a pro zone, pro. Okay, yeah, that's what I mean. So we went to Orem and we said, this is what we want to do.
this is the first time we're doing something like this, and we're going to put a lot of restrictions on it, and so we're not sure where the parking's going to land here. And so between Orem and us, we came up with, okay, how about 2.25 is what we'll do here. And what we found out was that was way too much parking. The buyers that are buying this are young kids, young families, singles, and older couples who want to live on the main floor because there's no basement, there's no stairs, so they can just live on the main floor. And so there are on the two projects there are banks of parking there. They're completely sold out. And the one on Sand Hill Road, we had landscaping equipment until a couple of weeks ago that was taking up 30 spots. And there were still dozens of spaces available for that project. It's just 2 spaces, and for the clientele that's buying this, it's just too many. So what happens, and this is what's happened in South Provo, when talking to Councilman Connect, he was saying, oh, thank goodness you're going to do something owner-occupied. That's what everybody promises to us, and then it turns into a bunch of rentals, and then he started naming off projects that this one's all rentals, this one's all rentals, and this is what happens with projects. They come to you with good intentions, and no one ever intends to do a project that eventually is going to turn into rentals or garbage. But they write weak CC&Rs, or they get boilerplate CC&Rs from an old project, or they just buy some from a lawyer. They're not specific to the project. They don't have any teeth in them. There's no fines. There's no way to enforce them. And so they sell the units to somebody, and some of them are occupied, some aren't. And then the next thing happens is somebody sells, and they sell to an investor, or somebody in the project buys that one. Then they buy another one. And then all of a sudden it's out of whack, and they're 51% investors. And so now they lose their FHA status, which affects everybody in there who has an FHA loan. And so now they can only do conventional, which limits the buyers again. So now I've got to come in here with 20% down. And so a little bit more of that, a little bit more of that, and now the place is completely unwarrantable, which basically means it's cash only in there. And now it's rental city, and prices stay where they are. They don't appreciate. It's garbage. Nobody cares because it's just a bunch of renters. Nobody cares anymore. And that happens over and over with projects. And so being aware of that, what we do is we write specific CC&Rs, and this is the things that we've met with the Leagues of Cities Executive Director, and he's actually using this model to teach cities with House Bill 34, this is what you should be doing in order to encourage affordable and to protect affordable in your cities. First of all, we write CC&Rs with teeth. That includes if I'm going to sell my unit and an investor is going to buy my unit, it has to pass through the HOA. And so the HOA is aware that, and I am aware that if I'm going to move out and rent my unit, I can get fined for that if it tilts the balance, and if I'm not allowed to do that. I can't sell it to an investor, and it might kill a sale. And everybody needs to be aware of that. And there's CC&Rs in there that are written, you can't rent your unit unless you get permission. You can't, there's a $500 a month fine for doing that. You got to clean up after your pet. You got to keep your thing, you got to keep your unit updated, kept up. And there's fines for all of that. Second, we hire a management company who understands the CC&Rs, and if they're written well enough, then it's easy for any management company to do it, but we hire a good management company who knows these are the CC&Rs, they're aware of what they need to be doing to make sure that 20 years from now, there's still the correct rental ratio in there, there's the investors and owner-occupied is still in there, and they're still levying fines for people who try and break it. Third, not everyone needs to be, and these are questions that if someone comes to you with this ordinance that says we're doing an affordable project, we'd like to be able to lower our parking a little bit because there are 2-bedroom units, we'd like to do the similar thing. These are questions that the city should be asking, and not that you can require them, but you should be asking these questions. We'd like to take a look at your CC&Rs to make sure that they're protective of the people and their equity in there. We'd like to make sure that your management company is aware of the CC&Rs. If someone comes preaching, we want to do an affordable housing project and we want to get 2 units or 2 parking spaces per unit like we're trying to do, then you need to say, well, tell me about your FHA financing, because that's a protection on the project. And if they don't have FHA approval, you need to get a good explanation for why, because that is paramount to affordability. Kids being able to afford to get an FHA loan. Fourth, Our project has a land use restriction that's recorded onto the project in addition to the CCNRs. It's completely separate. It says land use restriction. And so if a title company is pulling title to complete a sale, they might just send over the CCNRs and nobody looks at them. What we do is we also record separately a land use restriction that will pop up. And now everyone looks at that and says, oh, there's a land use restriction that refers to the CCNRs and the plat and the development agreement that says no more than 2 adults can live in this, in a unit. And that was said verbally. That's in our CCNRs, that's in our development agreement, and that's on the land use restriction. So there's no more than 2 adults that can live there. It has to be 60% owner occupied. FHA says 50%. We agreed to do 60%. We charge a premium to an investor for buying for an investor unit has to pay to discourage more investors. We also charge a premium on that, like $10,000 more for an investor unit. So no investor can buy these, stick 3 kids in there and start collecting rent. It's protected from that. We also recorded on the plat, in the notes of the plat, it says 2 adults, 2 parking stalls, and 60/40. So it's on the plat, the CCNRs, the development agreement, and a land use restriction that's recorded on the deed. And fifth, we have offered the city this development agreement that specifically mentions the ratio, the limit to adults. It's in the CCNRs. So if somebody wants to change the CCNRs, they're going to have to go to us and the city and say, hey, we'd like to change these CCNRs. We're going to say no. The city's going to say no. And so these are permanently in there. And finally, we've agreed to have, and this is just something we came up with, that the city wants to keep an eye on this project. We've allowed a non-city employee, the neighborhood chair, to be on the HOA committee. So if they ever want to take a look at, hey, how's this project doing? How the CCNR is looking? You know, how's the ratios and everything? Neighborhood chair can keep an eye on the project. So the city can use any of these or all of them to assess future people who are coming and applicants who are saying, hey, we also have an affordable project we'd like to do. We'd like a slight parking reduction. And the city can say, hey, let's take a look at your CCNRs. Let's take a look at your FHA. Do you have a development agreement? Let's take a look at your management agreement. Do you have anything on your deed restricting this? And so all that stuff was going to protect the project. There was one where one of the guys involved in this has done a project up in Orem called North Abbey 30 years ago. And a kid called him recently and said, I moved out and rented my place. They've charged me, for a year, they're charging me $6,000. What can I do? He said, it's 30. So I'll stop talking, but, as far as Provo and affordability, in addition to development, I own a real estate brokerage and work with buyers and sellers, and Provo has a huge affordability problem. There are no, if I'm a kid and I want to buy a unit for under $200,000, there are places I can buy with cash, and there's places I can buy with a conventional loan. But if I want to go buy a nice little brand new condo, nothing. There's nothing available. We will be the only game in town. If I have an FHA financing and I want to go looking in Provo, there's nothing I can find. Provo is as in deep a trouble as everywhere else as far as FHA and affordability. There are things that you can buy if you have cash, but if you're just a kid, just got married, I want to go buy a place, there's nothing available. And that's mostly what Kevin here is the agent who sold all 250 units up in Orem, and the buyers are, as according to him, are singles, first-time home buyers, kids, and they say, I can't afford anything, I need to live somewhere that's cheaper than rent, I can afford up to this much, this is it. And so we're excited to do this project because it fits a huge need. We have yet to put one of these on the MLS. It's all word of mouth, and we're 6 months behind all the time. We're building buildings and having them sell in the 3rd building that hasn't even broken ground yet because of the tremendous need for affordable housing for kids. I mean, somebody making $15 an hour can live in this and afford this. Also, Orem was worried about the proximity to UVU up there. It's right just down the street, right by Walmart, and they were worried about students packing in there, and this is going to turn into rentals. And this isn't people who need buses. These are people who they own a car, they own a motorcycle. They're kids who have jobs, And so it's not someone, oh, I'm just completely reliant on public transit. They're driving home in their car and, and then they're going to work the next day. UVU was what convinced Orem that we want more of this. And the mayor of Orem actually writes us if we ever go to a city, they write us a little, the mayor of Orem wrote a little, we love this project. It's worked out exactly the way we thought. We encourage any city to put it in their city. But it's worked out beyond what he thought with as far as parking and everything else. Anyway, if you have any questions on...
Mr. Ducher, the CCNRs that you discussed, has the city seen those, or the neighborhoods, or are they written?
Yeah, they're written.
That can be reviewed, or have they been reviewed?
Yeah.
Has the city seen those?
We don't have a copy of your CCNRs. We have a copy of the development agreement, but not the CCNRs.
Okay, yeah, they're specific to the project, and we added the mention of the development agreement in them, as well as the 60-40 split. And so, but yeah, that's important for a city to be able to see.
Thank you.
Affordability in Provo. So there's nothing on the market in Provo today that somebody can qualify for like they would be able to do here.
Yeah, I did a search and said, let's look at some condos, and there's but I can only go up to about $200,000. And there are stuff built in the 80s. There were about 17. And there's stuff built in the 80s. And then I said, how about FHA? 4.
Right,
so,
and I'll take that as a fact.
Yeah.
What communities in Utah County can you find, let's say, a condo in for a couple $100,000?
Oh, there's none.
No, right. So it's not at all unique.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
Not unique to Provo in any way.
No, it's everywhere, and it's. I mean, I just had somebody move from Provo. I built I flipped a house to them that was all messed up, and I flipped it in 2012. She bought it for me for 125, sold it for 225, and said, I think we can go up to 350. And I thought, oh, great, let's go look. Nothing up to 350. So she found a fixer-upper in Springville and moved into that. And so we were looking at townhomes, and she said, I want FHA, and we could not find nothing. It's brutal.
Relative to deed restrictions, how would it look, how would it work relative to future sales? Deed restrictions so that in the future, there's a value limit on what the units can be sold for?
No.
No.
These will always, they're 900 square feet.
So it's market rate?
Yeah.
Okay, and for me, market rate housing is not by definition, it is not affordable housing.
Right, if you want to do affordable and get involved, having the government involved and limit to what you can sell and everything.
Okay, but what you're saying is you're building something at a price point that you can sell.
Yeah, let me say affordable housing means
you're hitting a certain
subsidized
price point.
Yeah.
That's what so from my perspective, and again, I have serious reservations about the idea that there's a need for more affordable, however we want to define it, the way that the staff's defined it, I think is great, that there's any need for that in Provo. But I think it's absolute folly to think that something gets sold at a certain price point initially and it stays there.
No.
The market will drive what that sells for in the future. The only communities anywhere in the country that have been successful to sustain some measure of affordability over time have done it with limits on that future value and how that value grows and changes over time. So I think we're using some phraseology here that for me just doesn't work. If this is about affordable, it's not that in reality.
Yeah, when we say affordable, everyone thinks government subsidized housing. This is not.
Maybe not.
This is not. This is housing that's affordable. Say it that way.
It's affordable because of the financing structure, not necessarily because of the price point.
No, the price point.
It's a price point thing. From my perspective, really, that's what it is.
Yeah, we started the Villa de Este project up there at about 130,000, and now those are selling for 185. And so the kids who first bought that and the kids who bought in the 40s and 50s now have equity, and they're reselling those, and now they've got a piece of the American dream. They're buying a house, and now they got $50,000 to put on another house. So these will increase in value, but for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath place, they're not going to ever get up to where, I can never afford anything until someone comes along and says, I'm building studio condos, that's it. That's as small as they can go.
I think maybe you're selling your project short then. I'd get worried about a project where somebody doesn't think it's going to appreciate.
Oh, I think these are going to appreciate for sure. Yeah, but these are always going to be the bottom. Until someone starts building studios, these are going to be the bottom. There's not going to be a 3-bed, 2-bath FHA-approved place that sells for less than ours. We're going to be.
I appreciate the way you put that.
Yeah.
I think that's well
There's
said.
going to be a 2-bed, 1-bath place.
It's the FHA qualification that fits that niche.
Yeah.
Brings the access to that market to
Yeah,
that.
and the size of the unit. I mean, for a 4-story walk-up place, you know, I'm a young kid, and I go, I could do 4 stories. I live on the top floor. Great, 180,000. Great, let's do it. And so, you know, as I grow, and I go, okay, I'm done with that. I got these little kids I got to haul up. I'm moving out of here. I need to find another place. Oh, good, I've got a little equity in my place. That's what we hope for. I mean, we want them to go up. Okay.
Any other questions of the applicant?
I have a question.
Okay.
Do you want a neighborhood share on your HOA board?
No, that's up to them. We said we'd offer that because when we first met with the neighborhood meeting, they were a little worried about now CC&Rs can be changed, and without getting into all the details, you know, with the land use restriction and the development agreement that can't be changed unless the city signs off. We said, you know, what might help them is put the neighborhood chair in the HOA committee, and then she can see, or he can see, what's going on with the project, and if you know, in there, it even restricts, FHA restricts, there can't be one investor who owns more than 10% of the project. So that's usually what happens too. One guy in there, hey, that one's for sale, I buy that one, and he starts gobbling them up. That can't happen either. So she can see, you know, what's going on, and you know, if there's a need for, if someone's trying to change something, they can be aware of it. So that was just an idea that we had for a comfort level for the neighborhood.
Anything else for the applicant?
Yeah, I'd say something real quick.
Sure.
My name's Kevin Warner. I have sold the 2 projects in Orem that we've done. There are 250 units. I've sold every single one of them. And I can tell you exactly who is coming over there. These are young kids, and I'm very passionate about this. And there's some singles, but mostly just married, just getting married, no children. If a child is in the picture at all, it's on the way, or less than a year old. And so that's 90%. When we've got, as Brady said, some older people, we got the first floor, and we made it so they're able to, you know, wheelchair accessible. There's no steps. They can get in really easy. But we have an unprecedented problem here in Utah with affordable housing, because if things don't change in a few years, we're going to price out all those people that are really important, our children, first responders, our teachers. And these young kids have an opportunity to get in the game, so to speak, where they, I mean, the only thing that, I mean, nobody touches us price-wise. The only thing that beats us is somebody wants 3 bedrooms, or they want 2 baths, or they want an attached garage, and they're going to be well over $200 or $200,000 in this case. But you would be doing, and I've gone back. We came within an eyelash of not getting that one by by UVU on Sand Hill Road, not passed because of parking. And they extended it, you know, they didn't say no, come back, and we gave them a little more information, they approved it. I've been back 3 times to tell the city, just reporting, you've done a very good thing, because they are so grateful to have had the opportunity to have a chance to have the appreciation, to have a good experience with Orem, with Provo, and hang around, because they were able to buy a home at a price. And again, that FHA is key. And the thing is we can educate them that they don't want to lose that FHA, because who's going to buy this? A 2-bedroom, 1-bath condo. It's going to be a young couple just like themselves that will have less money down, less credit score requirements, the opportunity for mom and dad to help, down payments, co-sign, and then the Utah Housing Zero Down program. So anyway, they're so grateful, and it's just been such a great experience to be with them. And the one thing, again, the one on Sandhill never listed it. I never sat the model. But I had people off a sign on Sandhill, people off the sign on the freeway, calling me, and I met them and sold that thing out. My developer I sell for, he let me do my own real estate still. It was just that much demand that they need this. And then the rentals, those are the same thing. It's the same description. Just married, just getting married, some singles. Anyway, any questions? But thank you for your time.
Any questions, commissioners? Okay. We'll open up the floor to anybody from the public.
Hey, my name is Austin Taylor. I'm speaking as a resident tonight, not as Provo City staff. I just want to speak in favor of allowing parking minimum reductions for affordable housing projects. Couple things from Donald Shoup's High Cost of Free Parking. He's the prophet of parking, some people say. One thing is that building parking is expensive. In San Francisco, at least, it adds one space per unit adds 20% more to the cost of housing. That's probably because underground parking or garage parking, but it's still at least $5,000 per space for a surface lot. That goes directly into the price of a home. The second thing that he adds is that households that make less than $35,000 a year are 9 times more likely to not own a car than the ones who make more than $35,000. AAA finds that the cost to own a car and operate it in the United States is about $9,000 a year. So I don't think you're going to see these people having more than 2 cars. So I would recommend that the projects that are affordable housing be granted a minimum parking, a lower standard for the parking that they need. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public like to speak?
Marion Monahan, Edgemont Neighborhood Chair. First of all, I'm a little curious about something. Shouldn't the neighborhood chair from this area be allowed to speak first?
She can if she'd like.
I believe she is here.
If you have something to add.
I just had heard you say, please come, or whatever.
It's open to the public, yeah.
Okay, I see.
After the public?
No.
You're public, please. Resident of Provo.
I just didn't know what I should do there. Obviously, I think this would fit well in our neighborhood. I think it would be a good thing. However, saying that does not take care of the concerns. Parking has been an issue everywhere, in places where we never thought it would be an issue, and it is. So, if we hold it to everything that you think this can be, and if we have a remarkable legal mind here who could tell us whether we can file that kind of, those CC&Rs or whatever it is, with the land paper, or with, do you understand what I'm saying? Have it filed with the county? I know that when our home was built, they were looking to have an HOA, and that didn't happen. And just 5 years ago, there was a man who came before the Planning Commission, wanted to either divide the lots, because our lots are very deep, or change the zoning to something else. Both of those things were tried. We were told when we purchased the lot to build our home that all of that had been filed with the county records, so no one could deviate from what we were told. It never happened. And we came before the Planning Commission and thankfully had access to records from a long time ago, wherein the council said, hey, these lots should never be divided. This is what we need to stay with. And that was enough to turn that particular developer away. I don't want to see it happen with this. And if with the amendment to the parking restrictions, and they're able to hold up in a court of law, that's great. I myself have also never heard of a neighborhood chair sitting on an HOA board. But hey, if you want to stack the deck, whatever, you know, I may not be here then. So overall, I think it's something we as a neighborhood need. I think the city of Provo needs it. I think we have many housing needs that are going unmet. And we need to find a way to do that, and to do it well, and to do it wisely.
Anyone else from the public?
Marion Monahan, Edgemont Neighborhood Chair. Well, I'm thinking the parking might work in this project. It's on State Street. Hopefully we'll have good mass transit there someday. And it looks as though with 2 bedrooms, there probably would only be 2 cars. I want to caution you that most cities feel that they should have low affordable housing all over the city. So in another neighborhood, affordable housing might be 3 bedrooms. And there's no mass transit and so on. So I'm thinking, why make a citywide application on this? Can't it be attached to this project, if it's passed, that is, and make it a special thing just for this project, rather than just blanketing all over the city, whereas we might have problems that we don't foresee at the moment, and that's quite often what happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharon Memmott, I'm also in the Edgemont neighborhood, but have a couple of concerns, especially with item 7 specifically. But as I listen to your presentation, I can point out a couple of problems we've had in our neighborhood that kind of relate. I love your comment, Mr. Anderson, about location, because the projects that are being proffered in Orem as being great are both very close to grocery and schools and jobs and that kind of thing. This is, well, in the corridor we hope will be built up, it's not close to anything at the moment. You talked about the CC&Rs, and hopefully that will deter investors. We had a situation recently in our neighborhood where somebody bought a piece of property and had no clue, even after a title search, that there was a CC&R attached to the property. It had to be pointed out by neighbors when he was trying to do things that he couldn't do because of the CC&Rs. So not an ultimate guarantee to keep that. I'm a little curious how Fair Housing would feel about you telling me that I can't put my 3 adult children in whatever I purchase for my 3 adult children to live in. But we'll let the great legal minds worry about that, I guess. Mostly we're concerned about the wording of item 7 and whether that should be attached to affordable housing specifically, or whether it should be attached maybe to the size of the units. I agree with Marion that I can see a 2-bedroom unit being great for about 2 parking spaces. I have a problem with that in that now if you want to have a visitor, there's no parking for any visitor to come and visit. I hope your friends will want to visit you occasionally, but there's no mass transit and there's nowhere for them to park. Have fun. So that's my concern with the parking. I didn't know if the size of the unit maybe is what was the problem with the startup downtown and the issues that were created down there. So maybe that's why they went with affordable housing versus size of the units. Our concern with affordable housing specifically is that you could call it affordable housing, and this could be, I was doing a little math, and if he had 57 units for the 130 parking spaces he wants to fit, I could still see that being, if it's a 3-bedroom unit, this could easily grow into not sufficient parking in my mind. So I don't know that that's a specific way or a great way to make these numbers work. We talk about a lot in Provo about packing students. These sound too small for that, but I can see some units that might, again, if it was a larger unit, you might start packing students. Now this wouldn't be sufficient parking. So I don't know how you word it. I'm sorry that I don't have a good suggestion for that, but those are our concerns about making this a citywide change to the zone.
Thank you.
I'm Dave Rosen, River Bottoms Neighborhood Chair, and I will reserve most of my comments for the item 7 that addresses the citywide issues. However, I do want to echo the comments that have been made by the neighborhood chairs already. We live in these neighborhoods for many, many years. We watch these projects that start out as affordable housing and don't last as affordable housing. Condos and apartments are consistently lacking parking spaces. This one is trying to sneak in on the back of an affordable housing, yet they have covered parking. Is that really affordable housing? I'm not against the project as a whole, but I think they ought to live by the rules.
Will you please share your thoughts on item number 7? I think it's hard for us to parse it out, I think.
Yeah. My concerns with item number 7 is how they're written. They're almost impossible to enforce. I think they're short-sighted in how it's written. I do agree that Provo ought to have some sort of limitation that they can grant some reduced parking for some of these areas if they feel, but it ought to be very specific. To apply a specific development and then apply it to the whole city as a whole, I think is an inappropriate use and an inappropriate way of pushing this through from a city standpoint. And so I'm very much against that. Now, if the city wants to come and rewrite the ordinance and bring it back, but to couch it in the form of affordable housing with no way to enforce or really be able to determine and keep it in a long-term standpoint, I think is very inappropriate. And the code should not be changed just because one project wants to change it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That looks like everybody. That's,
Mr. Anderson.
go ahead and close the public hearing.
Could I comment to answer some of the questions that were asked?
Please, thank you.
Can I clarify, was this a public hearing for 5, 6, and 7?
Yeah, if we want to open it up again for 7 at a later time, we can, I guess, but
Okay.
the idea was we wanted
Has
to get it all
everybody
out.
spoken on 5, 6, and 7? Who wants to speak on 5, 6, and 7?
Yeah, so, yeah, we'll tell you what, we'll go 5 and 6, and we'll circle back.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'll tell you right now, though, to make a recommendation on a zone change that's contingent upon a text amendment that's later on an agenda. Frankly, it won't change the direction I'm going in, but it's kind of a challenge. So that being said, talking about the zone change, project plan, any discussion, Commission?
I'm interested in what they said about CUPs being the vehicle to handle this. I think in this particular project, I'm not sure that that's necessarily a bad thing to do. I don't know.
So if I could just answer some questions. Mrs. Miller, the things that get recorded at the county would be the plat and notes on the plat that state some of these restrictions that have been offered, the CC&Rs, the deed restrictions, and the development agreement. All of those things get recorded at the county to give people notice of what the game rules are, yeah. The other issue you raised that you mixed up with that I think may help, maybe I can clarify, is you can have all of those things recorded and you can have an HOA established, but many times it comes down to, does the HOA have either the funding or the will to file suit against members of their own organization? And that's where a lot of times HOAs...
Can we just talk through what CC&Rs are from that perspective? I think to your
Sure.
point, it's a private contract. So if you don't want to sue your neighbor, which in all likelihood is how they get enforced, then they don't get enforced. So I think it'd be really easy, and I appreciate the concept, and I think what the applicants are talking about is certainly well motivated. They're not a silver bullet, and it's not a perfect solution. In fact, I think it's a very problematic solution.
I think by offering 4 ways to accomplish it, the developer is in good faith trying to address the problem. The question is are we satisfied? Is the city satisfied with those solutions offered? To Mrs. Monahan's question, the only way we could do something site-specific, some type of amendment that's site-specific, would be to do a pro zone. To do a pro zone that's specific to this property that would have the parking ratio in it so that there would be a reduction at this site, but not open the door to other sites across the city. And that's an alternative the Planning Commission and City Council could consider. Perhaps a pro zone would be a better way to skin this cat. That option is still out there. I think those are the only comments I had to try to clarify questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have some comments. One of my concerns is with the neighborhood chair being on the HOA board. Our neighborhood chairs do quite a lot, and I'd hate to ask them to do more. And where they're not, I don't think they're official representatives of the city. That seems like it could get dicey between the city and the HOA, and then on the HOA, let's say there's some dispute there because a member of the HOA board does not live or invest in that development. I think that would get really sticky, and I don't want to set a precedent for all neighborhood chairs being on all HOAs or any HOAs. It is unfair of us to ask that of a developer because it could get sticky, and of a neighborhood chair because it could get sticky. And there may not be a neighborhood chair program in 30 years, but there could be this development in 30 years. So I'm in favor of removing that element.
Making an option.
Not an option, not an option. I just think that it's sticky all around, in my opinion. If someone wants to dispute that, we can discuss that, but it just seems like it could get sticky really fast, and I don't like creating the precedent.
Parking, how do we feel about parking? I don't know how we recommend approval of a zone change unless we're on board with the idea of the parking.
Personally, for this piece, this particular project, I don't think the parking as presented would be an issue. But I share the concerns that a citywide application like that could have some issues with it. I don't see the 2 stalls per unit as an issue with this one, but I don't know how to address it.
Let me ask you this, if it's not a problem here, where would it be a problem? Really, for me, if there was a project that we've looked at in recent years that needed as much parking as any other project in the city, this would be it.
Because of the distances involved.
It's out there, and again, I think we're talking about a demographic that they'll have a couple of cars, and there'll be a need for guest parking and different things like that. And if we want to reduce the parking requirements citywide, that'd be, for me, just from a rational perspective, trying to apply some logic, that would make more sense than having less parking here than elsewhere. And again, I think there's a really high cost with not having enough parking or enough free parking. Frankly, I feel like, we're creating a situation for the future residents where they will reap just the reality of what made an initial purchaser and seller be able to do a deal on the front end by not looking out for their needs long term. So that's my thought relative to the parking.
And like you said earlier, I think we should be concerned about its proximity to mass transit and the overall transportation network, because it's not a hospitable environment, State Street, for pedestrians, and I don't think there's a lot of mass transit moving on State Street. So, the context, I think, in terms of parking and mobility is complex.
Any thoughts about how you want to proceed with the zone change then? Is it a recommendation to deny? Is it somebody moving to continue to let them retool the parking?
Yeah, typically we've done these together. I think that, I don't personally have a problem with the direction of the zone change, but I don't see a need to do that until we address the project. I don't know. I'm still thinking about it.
Well, parking in general has been an issue. I mean, it comes in front of us
It does.
multiple times. I mean, that's probably our main issue. And we always have a problem. And the same thing will happen in this project. I mean, if we had a neighborhood chair just address an issue, if one of the tenants has some sort of an activity, that means, you know, they're going to take up a bunch of those parking spots, and legal residents then have nowhere to park. So.
And to that point, I don't think we should plan parking for one-off events, right? So the one
No.
or two times in a summer when there's some kind of event there. I don't want to overplan parking and I don't want to underplan parking. But it seems like we don't know where that center point is.
Well, I think the city's, just speaking for myself, the city standard is intended to balance that, and I completely agree that there's no need to overpark a site. 2.25 is the standard that we're talking about deviating from.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, you know, one guest space for every 4 units is all that terribly excessive. But again, for me, I fundamentally really struggle with the idea that affordability is justification for a parking reduction. Geography, different things like that. I've struggled with that a little bit as well on some other projects, but that makes a lot more sense to me than hitting that price point with a new unit.
I don't know how I feel about this.
I'll keep speaking.
Go ahead.
Somebody wants to.
Go for it.
And I
what
certainly will shut up and entertain a motion. I've appreciated the counsel we've been given by staff that zoning is what matters. When the zoning's changed, then the role that the city plays in terms of regulating what a project looks like and how it works, you know, changes. So that's why, for me, item 5 is really the important one for
tonight. One concern I have is that we do have a lot of apartments in Provo, and we have a lot of single-family residential on 1/3 of an acre. We don't have a whole lot in between. Is this really different from what we have?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I've thought a little bit about, I mean, obviously, again, like I've talked about in maybe a meeting or two here recently, the percentage of properties in Provo that are renter occupied is really high. And just looking at the ACS numbers from 2015 to 2017, it's growing. This seems like might provide an opportunity for, you know, more propensity for there to be owner-occupied housing.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Short-term owner-occupied housing, right?
That's exactly where I was going to go. And
If you don't like renters that are transient, you're not going to like owners that are transient.
the dialogue, it seems like in Provo, has changed over the last 20 years, whereas as I remember it 20 years ago, a big concern was not so much, well, I guess this is a factor of the renter occupancy, but just the turnover rate in neighborhoods. And we certainly see that in the neighborhood that I live in. And while this product might be great for certain people, I think there's a pretty low likelihood that folks are going to be staying on those 3rd and 4th floors. And I think, you know, the applicants kind of help us understand how that probably would work in future years. I think they're would be a high turnover rate. And yeah, I struggle with that entirely from a perspective that doesn't just relate to parking, relative to really wondering what good this is for the neighborhood and the city down the road. So,
Mr. Chair, can you move your microphone down? We can't hear the recording.
Blast out.
You have really good thoughts. We want to hear them.
I agree. I think given the demographic that we heard would move into this kind of unit, I can't imagine a pregnant woman wanting to go up 3 or 4 flights of stairs, or carry a baby carrier up three flights of stairs. So, I mean, not that it doesn't happen, and yeah, I am concerned about. Yeah, I'm concerned about this project. I don't know, for a variety of reasons.
You know, we looked at a townhome project not far from this, right? Just a few weeks ago,
Yeah, just to the north of it.
like adjacent to it. And for me, that that would have a much higher propensity to be owner occupied.
The one behind it or the one north on State Street?
I'm thinking that lots of Browns.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Is that the one just north of this?
No,
It seemed like that one was closer to,
It's further south, you're right.
further south? Okay. Fairly contemporary kind of a design, that one. And that's where I really think that product is what's going to dictate whether they're owner occupied, how long people stay there, and therefore, how well they can put down roots in a neighborhood and influence things in different ways than you have with just that shorter term kind of occupancy.
I can see people staying longer in a townhome. There's more lifestyles that fit into a townhome than into this kind of product.
You can cover more of that life cycle, right?
Yeah.
It seems like.
Well, I think we continue it.
Did I just hear a motion?
The jury's hung, but Mr. Howard.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chair, I move that we continue item 5 and item 6 until the details of this can be worked out.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I sustain.
And one abstain, so that was 4 in favor with 1 abstention. On to item number 7.
I think we should continue that one, just to ferret out the nuances of it all. It seems like there's some wordsmithing to do and some thoughts to be had.
I agree with that. Before we do that, does anybody have anything they'd like to add relative to number 7? If you do, please come on forward.
I guess what I'm going to add is the answer to the question to Bill. What does the pro zone entail? Is there anything in this project that would fall outside of the requirements for a pro zone?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but the value of the pro zone would be that a lot of the stuff that's being done through development agreement and through CCNRs would be written into the zone itself so that the city could enforce some of those provisions. Then the other value is that the parking could be adjusted for this project only and not open the door to citywide reductions.
Which is the lesser of the two evils? Is it doing the definition of affordable housing and going that route with the amendment to the parking, or would it be easier and maybe better in the long run to just go pro zone rather than an MDR?
The pro zone satisfies the concerns of the neighborhood chairs who are worried about this spreading around the city in cases where it's not as appropriate. And the pro zone is probably a faster path for them to move forward than to try to solve these larger.
Is it wise?
We try to avoid pro zones because we have 35 of them already, and administering 35 pro zones in addition to 30 or 40 other zones we've got in the city, it's
Understood.
not ideal. But the door to doing another pro zone isn't closed.
Okay. All right, so it's up to them.
Could we say, we're committed to working on the parking. We're getting caught up with affordability and everything. The fact is, these are 900 square foot units. They're not gonna, and we've already limited to 2 adults. So this isn't people that are, everyone has 2 cars. Everyone's gonna show up with 2 cars. We had Hales Engineering do a study on our other 2 projects I forgot to mention. They came back and said every unit needs 1.36 parking spaces, which would be 83 spaces in this. And we said, well, we're at 130, and they go, oh, you're gonna have too many at 130. And so all this talk, if there's no public transit and everything, these are 2-bedroom units. One is a regular bedroom, one is a small bedroom. It discourages, and we actually prohibit people packing in 3 people that have 3 cars. So there's gonna be plenty of parking. We're ready to go pro zone. We're ready to do it anyway. It's just, this is a unique project, and if affordability on this is now these are $220,000, then these are still 2-bedroom units. Small bedroom units at 900 square feet. So it's not going to be people packing in there. It's prohibited. They just simply can't do it. And as far as it being legal, absolutely legal. We limit 2 adults. We don't say they have to be 2 white adults. We just say 2 adults. So no one can buy this and say, I have 3 adult children. They all want to move in there. Can't do it. You can't buy one of these then. Go buy a 3-bedroom place. Thank you.
And it's the affordability that drives this. I mean, the young people don't care to be on the 4th floor or the 3rd floor. They just want in.
Okay, we understand that. Thank you.
Again, Dave Rosen, River Bottoms Neighborhood Chair, and I'm just going on record for item number 7 that I think this is an inappropriate use. Mr. Anderson, I agree with you to tie parking to affordability, I think is an inappropriate use. I think it's inappropriate to change a citywide ordinance. The city and the city council went to great lengths over the last few years to move from some of the zone classifications to low-density residential, LDR, MDR, and HDR. And a lot of thought went into establishing the parking requirements for each of those zones and the requirements that go with those zones. And so when we ask for a zone change and then immediately ask for variances to those zone changes, I think that's inappropriate. Again, those changes were done to help the city try to manage these pro-zone things that are proliferating throughout the city that are very difficult. So again, on record, I'm not in favor of item 7. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 7, anyone else? Hey, if you want to get it on the record, you should approach the podium sooner than later.
I think Mr. Rosen brings up some good points about changing this citywide, and we've made our remarks earlier simply because that's kind of the way it was presented, so thanks.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else rushing the podium, so we'll close the public hearing for item number 7. Any discussion? 7. If not,
I think we're done.
okay.
I move we adjourned.
Do we want to?
I'd like to make a motion on item number 7.
We need to do that.
And I appreciate that, but and I move that we continue item number 7 until June 12th or until the staff has had sufficient time to make a more broadly informed recommendation to the Planning Commission.
Thank you very much. I have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Discussion on the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Unless, do we have anything else, staff? Do you have anything for us?
I move we adjourn.
Motion. Mr. Phillips, second. All in favor? Adjourn. Thanks.